Last year, they went and took it. This year, it's time for the Texas Rangers to run it back. Welcome into Bleav in Rangers, everybody. I'm your host, Mitch Vareldzis. This, the first edition of the 2024 season for Texas Rangers coverage on the Bleav Podcast Network. And I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to watch this team. Of course, got to watch them play a lot of baseball games last year, making the run to the World Series and then eventually winning it all in Arizona in 5 games. But now that that is nearly behind us, as opening day is almost here, I can feel the anticipation, I'm sure, from a lot of you and for myself. As a huge baseball fan, I live for this day. This is my Christmas in March. Basically, this is my birthday in March. My birthday's in December, so I have to wait all year for any sort of presents or anything like that. But as far as what gets me excited year in and year out is when the players come in for spring training, the pitchers catchers report, and there's all this excitement around these young prospects and the renewed hope for your team and a chance to go out and maybe win the World Series this year. The nice thing about the Rangers is that they're just coming off the World Series win. And of course, while we're hopeful that the Rangers are going to go out and take it again, we do also have a little bit of a relief, per se, now that we got the first one out of the way, the first one in franchise history. At the same time, winning is good and winning feels good. And I'd like to see this Texas Rangers team keep winning for a while. It would be really good to see them go out there and take it for a second year in a row. So let's talk about a few things. Opening day is almost here. Recording this currently on Monday, the 25th of March. So opening day, just a few days away from that Thursday, the 28th, when they host the Chicago Cubs. The roster's almost there as far as who's left to say, unfortunately, goodbye to, who's left to assign to certain positions. Like, right? So, for example, the Rangers are, as I'm watching it in my room right now, they're in the top of the 9th inning of their exhibition game against the Boston Red Sox. And the lineup that they threw out there today, as I'm pulling it up right now, very, very, very close to what we could see on opening day, depending on how Bruce Bochy wants to approach this lineup. In case you didn't see it, Marcus Semien lead off, Corey Seager hitting second, good to have him back, and he was playing shortstop. I think that's an important note too, given he's been battling an injury for most of spring. Evan Carter third, we saw that a lot in the postseason. He was in left field as well. Adolis Garcia in right. Josh Young at third, also huge, just coming back from an injury. He and Corey were able to get in one more game in Arizona before they departed for Texas, and he was at third base. Wyatt Langford, we're going to be talking about Wyatt a lot this year. Just general excitement about he who was drafted 4th overall literally last year and is now going to make the opening day roster. It's already so far a home run pick. I don't have an opinion on rushing it or not. We'll get more into Wyatt throughout the show. Jonah Heim, the backstop behind the plate. Jared Walsh at first base, of course, with Nathaniel Lowe dealing with his injury. He's been out for a little bit now. He may not even make the opening day roster due to injury. He might have to start on the injured list. We'll see about that. But Jared Walsh filled in rather nicely so far in the spring. And then Leody Taveras in center. And of course, you want him at the bottom of the order. He provides the switch hitting bat, center field. He's got the speed. He's got the defense. He's got everything that you need at the bottom of the order. He's like a perfect bottom of the order candidate. And that's not supposed to come as a diss, as like, yeah, we want you to hit 9th in this order. It's just the perfect spot for Leody, right? That lineup outside of Nathaniel Lowe seems pretty darn close to what they're going to see from the Rangers all season long, right? Like Semien, Seager, Carter, Garcia, Young, Langford, Heim, Walsh, and Taveras. That seems pretty locked to me, but of course, without Nathaniel Lowe, we have no real guarantee. As far as if you were to make like tiny tweaks here and there, I'm looking at it now. Maybe Josh Young doesn't hit 5th on some nights. He's really good protection for Adolis Garcia when he's healthy. We know that. And he kind of now has to step into that spot because Mitch Garver primarily was in that protect Adolis spot, of course, until Adolis got hurt and had to miss the last couple of games of the World Series. But it's kind of crazy that this team was able to just replace Mitch Garver with a guy that they drafted last year. And Wyatt Langford has had a ridiculous spring. Ridiculous enough that it almost, almost covers up for the fact that the Rangers really didn't do a lot of spending this offseason. But we'll get into that in a second. As far as the pitching goes, there was a plan for the Rangers going into this one. They started with Jacob Latz, and then they kind of went down the list. They pre-listed who the pitchers were going to be for this one, so there wasn't a starter in this one. It was more of a bullpen game. Like, this was clearly just to test out some arms, see how they do, because there's still some final decisions to be made at the back end of that bullpen. So Jacob Latz got the start, and then he turned it to Blake Taylor, Austin Pruitt, Josh Sborz, who's probably got nothing to worry about if we're being honest, Brock Burke, Grant Anderson, a couple of guys that could be fighting for a final spot in the bullpen, Shane Green, David Robertson, and Kirby Yates. And there you have three veterans who very likely, I mean, Kirby Yates, David Robertson, yes, easily. Shane Green could go either way. I'm curious how they approach the structure of this bullpen. Like, do they care how many pitchers are left-handed versus right-handed? Do they care how much experience one guy has versus another? Like, how much weight was put into the performance that they had during the spring in terms of building this full bullpen, excuse me. And then on top of that, I was reading a piece from Jeff Wilson, who does Rangers Daily. I don't think they really know who their closer is yet. And if I had to guess, I'm not sure that they need to go aggressively look for one. I think they have a couple of good options. I think it's more dependent on what are they going to end up doing. Is it going to be a night to night thing? Is it going to be we are guaranteed going to go with Jose Leclerc, for example? Let's say they decide to go with Leclerc and he pitches great, and then maybe he hits a snag in June. Not that we're wishing for that. Josh Sborz got the last outs of the World Series, pitched 2 innings. Granted, it was setting up for Leclerc, I'm sure. And in the end, when the Rangers scored all the runs that they did in the top of the 9th inning, it became less of a need and more of a, all right, Josh, you're just going to go out there, you're going to finish things off. But he's pitching in high leverage situations. So you could almost argue that maybe he's who could be a front runner consideration wise. Like, Jose has been with this team for his entire career. He's been really good in the leverage spot, in the high leverage spots, and he's also had some rough moments in the high leverage spots. Lest we forget game, 5 against the Astros, and they had a chance to lock things up and give themselves a 3-2 advantage going back to Houston. And this isn't all Jose's fault, but he was on the mountain. This is what happens. You cannot get blamed for all this. He goes out there and he gives up the home run to Altuve that eventually leads to the Astros win. And then the Rangers, and the rest is history. They won the World Series. Boo-hoo. I'm crying about nothing, I'm sure. But it is still an example of, can you pitch in the biggest moments on the biggest stage? Leclerc can. Can he do it this year? And I think he's the best candidate to start with this. And then Bruce or Boch, he can just decide whatever he wants to do from there. And we'll just have to wait and see. But that's my thoughts as far as the closer spot is concerned. We did get a couple of transactions per the waiver wire. Justin Foscue and Mark Church are, it seems like, headed to AAA. Foscue, he's not like to the level of Langford in terms of prospect status, but he is still one of the top prospects of this organization. I don't know if he would have had a ton of playing time up at the major league level. With, you have Semien at second, you have a healthy, or we hope healthy, Josh Young at third, Corey Seager at short. And if you have Langford in the lineup every day, he's probably going to be DH, maybe spell a couple days in left field. There's not a lot of room for Foscue in order to get those big or those high amount of at bats and games. So as a result, it's it's the it's the devil's advocate thing. Do you want him on the big league roster for the sake of saying yes, he's on the big league roster? Or do you want him to be at a level that is he's very well proven in AAA, but he gets to play every day and he gets the experience of playing every day? And that's the tough thing about approaching this is that if you have a good prospect and you want him on the team and he's had a pretty good spring, the least you could do is reward them by giving them a spot on the major league roster. It just doesn't always work that way. And I think the key thing is you want to keep Foscue consistent. And the easiest way to do that is to give him some time at AAA. The other one is Mark Church, who he's been having a great spring for the pitching staff. And I know this pitching staff is dealing with some injuries, more so in the starting rotation than the bullpen. But maybe they just want to see him get a few more reps against some consistent competition, right? Like spring training can be so hard to judge because it's 1 second you're facing the major league lineup, and then the next inning it's all of the guys who you're normally going to be pitching against at the minor league level. So I don't think this is a knock on either, but maybe they could be called upon immediately when the time comes. Another thing, real quick, last thing about the roster. Jared Walsh seemed to he's looking pretty darn close to the Jared Walsh that he was back in, what was it, 2021 when he was an all-star? Not fully to the all-star level, but very encouraging recovery given that he had a bit of a down year in 2022, nothing close to all-star level, and then was battling injuries all last year when he was with the Angels and almost essentially found his way off the team because of it. And they have high hopes for their last year draft pick in Nolan Schanuel, who's probably going to play first base for them. Jared Walsh, you're not sacrificing a lot to have him on the team. He's got years of big league experience. You clearly have a need at first base right now with no Nathaniel Lowe for the time being. I think Jared Walsh can be that perfect fit for the time being. And there's low stress on him because when he was with the Angels, he was hitting all over the top of the order, right? Or in the upper part of the order, in prime positions in the order. I just read you the lineup from tonight against the Red Sox. He was hitting eighth. He was hitting eighth in an order that has so much protection already ahead of him. There's far less for Jared Walsh to worry about in this lineup. And it almost makes it perfect for him to be considered as like a bounce back candidate almost. Maybe not comeback player of the year. He would have to get more consistent playing time for that to be considered. But enough playing time that people will start to take notice again. And maybe it can result in him getting a starting job somewhere else next year. You want him this year. You want to get the bounce back Jared Walsh this year. And then if he decides to leave in free agency next year, then so be it. But then you could say you were the team that found what Jared Walsh had been missing the last couple of years. And we got it back, baby. All right, so that'll cover everything that we've got from the exhibition game from this evening, this Monday evening, excuse me. Let's talk about the offseason really, really quickly. Just like the best thing from the offseason and the worst thing from the offseason. In my opinion, because the offseason didn't have a ton of major transactions. They signed Michael Lorenzen last week, was it? To a 1-year deal. Will he fill in the rotation or will he fill in the bullpen? We're not totally sure. He's not 100% ready yet. Bruce Bochy will let us know when he is. Adrian Beltre making the Hall of Fame on first ballot. I thought that was a pretty big deal this offseason. Not so much the fact that he made it to the Hall of Fame. I think there were a lot of people that understood the value that Adrian Beltre brought and who Adrian Beltre was and what he meant to the DFW. But the fact that he got in first ballot That's huge in today's Hall of Fame voting standards, right? Very rarely do you get guys that go in first ballot anymore. Some of the ones that feel fringy, and I'm not saying Beltre was fringy by any means. Some of the candidates that feel fringy but have a really good resume have to sit around and wait for years. I mean, think about Billy Wagner. Didn't make it to the Hall again this year. One of the best closers in his era. And he's going into what now? Year 6? Year 7 on the ballot next year? Adrian Beltre, it was, I'm done after 1. He got in. He's good. That was my favorite moment from the Rangers offseason. I know there were surely several others. Um, but yeah, I think seeing Beltre get in, 1, because he was 100% deserving, and 2, because that's just another Ranger to add to the Hall of Fame. And a guy who really meant a lot to the DFW. Like, he kind of had the same impact because he didn't start with Texas, obviously. He kind of had the same impact that Miguel Cabrera did when he went to the Tigers. And then Miggy just hung around with the Tigers even when he started to, his production started to decline, etc. But Beltre still put up several good years after those 2 World Series runs and a couple of playoff appearances. He was still playing well. It's just unfortunate that the team's performance around them kind of suffered. The bad of the offseason, I don't want to knock this organization too much for not spending big in free agency, because you literally look at the payroll and, well, Marcus Semion's making a ton of money, Corey Seager's making a ton of money, John Gray, Jacob deGrom, they got Max Scherzer in a trade who they're not paying nearly as much. Like, this team did its big spending. It just was over the past 2 off seasons and not this off season. And yeah, they added Michael Lorenzen. He's going to be important. It was interesting to see how quickly he fell off of the playoff rotation, or fell out of the playoff rotation, I should say, for Philly. He pitched a no-hitter in his second start for Philadelphia. He's coming off, technically speaking, an all-star campaign when he was with the Tigers before he got traded. This feels like a very low-risk move for a rotation that desperately needs arms. Nate Eovaldi is going to start opening day. But then after that, you don't have deGrom. He's going to start the year on the injured list. Same with Max Scherzer. Jordan Montgomery is still a free agent if you're listening to this right now, and that has changed. The point being is that we're 3 days away from opening day, and a guy who was pitching into the World Series and a big part of the Texas Rangers' pitching success is still on the open market. So adding Lorenzen to this rotation is almost much needed insurance more than it is like a luxury, because of the lack of depth and the injuries dealt with the big 2 stars. Because, of course, when deGrom and Scherzer come back, then they pair with Eovaldi, and you've still got John Gray, and then you've got other candidates, including Andrew Heaney, who could easily fill out the rest of the rotation. But right now, it's just a bunch of question marks and a lack of health. And it's tough, too, because they only signed Lorenzen last week, and now he's kind of being rushed into, well, not rushed, he'll pitch when he's ready, but essentially being rushed into duty to be ready for this title defense the Rangers are about to go on. The other thing that was kind of rough this offseason, and maybe this attributed to, or maybe this was I can't use the right word between contributed and attributed. I'll have to look it up after this. Maybe this is what led to the low spending this offseason. The TV deal situation. And I'm not going to get too in deep into, blaming either side or anything like that. The facts are the facts. The company that owns Bally Sports Southwest filed for bankruptcy. The company Diamond Sports Group has already lost at least 2 teams of the Major League Baseball teams that they broadcast. They're also a major distributor for hockey and basketball, and have lost some hockey and basketball teams as a result of them filing for bankruptcy. But the Rangers are still going to be broadcast on Bally Sports Southwest, but only as far as we know for this year. After that, it'll be important for this organization to figure out what they want to do. Because I don't think the best thing for them to do is to keep holding on to a sinking ship, respectfully. Again, they've declared bankruptcy as Diamond Sports Group. it is not a good idea to keep holding on to this ship because all this is right now is it's kind of like a band-aid that just patches up a crack that is significantly larger than what this band-aid can support. And eventually this band-aid's going to have to come off and they're going to have to replace it with something else. So for right now, this will work. It'll be fine. You've at least got the familiarity for another year. Same broadcast team, same broadcast crew, etc. Well, except for CJ Nikowski. But the point being is that there is some consistency from the uncertainty that hit in the middle of last year into what is now this year, where more eyes are going to be on the Rangers than ever before in their entire history. And you want those eyes. And I'm curious to see how they approach it when next season rolls around. And now, a special segment that we're going to introduce after every single podcast to help buy into the Wyatt Langford hype. Let's call it Wyatt Watch. So this is Wyatt Watch, and basically what it is we look at how Wyatt Langford did for the day. We already know about the ridiculous spring he's been having. So today, it just went final, by the way. 9-2 Red Sox in Globe Life Field. Score doesn't matter. It's fine. Wyatt Langford today went 0 for 4, but he scored one of the team's 2 runs. And he still had some really good attempts at the plate. Like, he looked really, really good from the dish in terms of just his approach and his swing and his follow through. He's got that little bit of nasty when he's in the box. Just to recap how good of a spring he's been having, in 60 at-bats, hit .350, 6 home runs, and batted in 20 with an OPS of 1.086. Man, this kid is cool, right? I mean, this is awesome. The fact that they drafted him last year and now he's essentially Mitch Garver's replacement, and it'll cost the Rangers nothing to do so. I'm curious what this leads to, though. And I know we just talked about the TV deal kind of being in flux, limbo, however you want to phrase it. The Rangers need to start thinking about paying Wyatt Langford right now. And here's why. The Seattle Mariners a couple of years ago, after one amazing season with Julio Rodriguez, where he was Rookie of the Year, where he made the All-Star team, where he was in the Home Run Derby, he did all the things that a popular first-year player would do, right? The Mariners locked him up for as long as they could, as long as they reasonably could. Last year, prior to the start of the 2023 season, Corbin Carroll with the Arizona Diamondbacks locked up at least the next 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head. This past offseason, or like only a couple of months ago, Kansas City Royals, Bobby Witt Jr. locked him up for almost the next decade plus. The big thing about these extensions to these young guys is, one, you're establishing your core and you're telling other players who you are as an organization when you're handing out these types of contracts to these young, very talented players this early in their career. That's number one. And if you want to look at it from a financial aspect, number two, you're not paying them the exorbitant amount of money that they would probably command once their arbitration years are bought up. So my advice to Texas is, if you love Wyatt Langford, make him yours. Get down on one knee, open up the little box, and hand him a contract that keeps him in blue and red for at least the next 10 years. Here's the greatest advantage that the Rangers have over any of the other teams that I just mentioned. He was just drafted last year. He's already old enough to play in the big leagues, literally months after he has been drafted. And you know that he's going to be a big part of this team's success for a long time. And he's now part of a younger group of guys, including Josh Young and Evan Carter, that can help keep this Rangers team successful and even push for more championships in the future. So that's my Wyatt soliloquy. Maybe some of y'all agree, maybe some of y'all disagree. You should let me know. You can talk about it in the comments of this video if you're watching on YouTube, or you can reach out to me at Swingin' a Mitch on Twitter or X, whatever it's called. And I think we're also going to work on putting together a Twitter page for the Bleav in Texas Rangers podcast account, just so that we could filter purely Rangers content there. Because sometimes I like to talk about other things on my Twitter account, and I currently work in Arizona. That's like my regular job, so I can't only just talk about Texas Rangers stuff on my Twitter feed. But I'll definitely have a place that we could talk everything there is to know about the Texas Rangers. So, really quickly, before we go, what can you expect about this podcast moving forward? Well, I've kind of set it up to be scheduled so that you at least get bite-sized Texas Rangers content twice a week. What does that mean? Podcasts in 30 minutes or less, 2 times a week. That's the bite-sized part. The 2 times being, let's just say for this week, for example, we got opening day on Thursday, so I think the plan will be to do a Thursday night react to opening day pod. What do we see? That one will probably be only 15 minutes or so. And then going forward, the schedule will be after every Sunday game and then after every Wednesday game. So then you can expect podcasts Mondays and Thursdays in the mornings following series during each week. And I think that's the best way to keep things consistent. So the next time you'll hear from me will be after opening day when the Texas Rangers take on the Chicago Cubs. But until next time, I'm Mitch Vareldzis for Bleav Podcasts and Bleav in Texas Rangers.